All right, I am going to get us started here. We typically allot for, let's see, 75 minutes because we found that past meetings, sometimes the discussion part kind of trickles over through the hour. And so for folks who would like to stay, you are welcome to do so, but feel free to, hop off whenever you need to. Um, these meetings are really meant to be a place for folks who are interested in the well-being of the profession. We have lots of folks here who have joined us in the past. I see a lot of new folks here, which is exciting. Really, this place is meant to be a place where we can share ideas, exchange resources, learn from one another's experiences, all with this shared goal in mind, with creating this healthier and more supportive environment for legal professionals. And so we welcome you here, whether you are local to Massachusetts or not. I know we have folks from outside of Massachusetts, and our speaker is from outside of Massachusetts, and so we always welcome you to join us. Although this is sort of hosted by the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court Standing Committee on Lawyer Wellbeing. Just to note, we do record these meetings. We post them on our website, and so you can see the link up here. We also post the slides, so you will have those available as well. So it's the place where you went to register. We have all that there. If you ever want to take a look at any past recordings or any materials, we'll have that there. And I'll probably refer to some links as well. So those will all be available on that web page as well. All right, so let's see. So I wanted to give, as I usually do, just a couple of updates from the SJC Standing Committee on Lawyer Wellbeing. I'm the director of the Standing Committee, which was founded in 2020. So it's been a while. I cannot believe that it's been almost 5 years. And what we have been doing is working to implement a 2019 steering committee report with a number of different recommendations on how to change culture, how to implement, make systemic and organizational changes in the profession so that we can reduce burnout, we can help with reduce some of the stigma, to help folks go out and get help when they need it, and really create a healthier profession for everyone. So that is what we're doing here. So I just want to give just a couple of notes here from the SJC committee. And if you are not on our email list, please feel free to let us know. You probably all are, just by virtue of having registered for this meeting, but we don't send out that many emails, but we try to send out updates every couple of months on what we're up to and what some of the other service providers are up to. So that's one way that we connect with you. I want to also give a shout out to Sybil Gallen, who is our SJC Standing Committee project manager, who is responsible for pretty much everything these days, and keeps us on track, and has great ideas, and has really been a huge benefit to this committee and our ability to achieve some of our goals. So Sybil, so folks have probably come in contact with Sybil, and Sybil's here today. So just a couple of notes here, just for those folks who are not as familiar with our committee. This is sort of what we see as our kind of priorities, what we've really been working on in the past 5 years. And so kind of broken up into, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 areas. The first being creating awareness of the importance of well-being in the profession. And so that's something that we've worked on for a number of years, and sort of as this movement of well-being has grown, and really trying to create the buy-in. And we can see it even through the sort of evolution of these meetings, where we started very small, and now we've got hundreds of people who register for every meeting, which I think, again, is just a testament to lots and lots of people understanding that this is really an issue in the profession and we need to start paying attention. So appreciate everyone out there who, and I see lots of folks on this meeting right now who are really ambassadors and have been doing a lot of work in their own workplaces and different associations, both locally and nationally. So that's a lot of the work that we're doing. We also believe that it's really important to have leaders on board. So leaders who can buy in and really help to create supportive, inclusive, and equitable workplaces. And so we have meetings with bar leaders. We go out and we speak to a lot of leaders in the profession and work with those folks. We've been doing some management training in some of the legal services organizations, and so we know that it's really important for this to come from the top. Leadership has to buy into this. And then we have been also working on developing programs and services to support lawyers, law students, and judges. And so there's a number of them listed here. I'm going to call out just a few of them so you're aware of them. Everything is on our website. We work really closely with all the bar associations, other service providers as well to do this work, because what we're trying to do is really change policies, make those systemic changes, and we couldn't do it without the help of all the partners. So developing strategies and policies that address well-being and evaluate those. And so we've worked on some studies. We've looked at sort of data in the profession. We have addressed judicial well-being. We've done some sort of informal surveys there. We've done some we did some town halls with the affinity bar associations talking about lived experiences. And so that's been some of our work as well to kind of gauge where the profession is and then use that data to help us make these informed decisions on sort of where we're going to go from here. We also administer, for folks who are here in Massachusetts, we have a rule now that requires the collection of demographic and law practice data for every lawyer here in Massachusetts, so we can have an understanding of the makeup of our bar. And so the SJC Standing Committee is actually responsible for administering that and analyzing the data and sort of looking at trends to see, are we becoming more diverse as a profession? Are we sort of Boston centric? Where are practitioners practicing? And so that also helps us in terms of the recruitment efforts, thinking about, who's becoming a lawyer and how we increase diversity in the profession. So we do that too. And then work very closely with Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers, which hopefully everyone knows is the state's lawyer assistance program, which is a free and confidential program. They go out, they do lots of trainings. They train leaders. They also, they've been doing mental health first aid training that some of you may have participated in. They have become trainers themselves, and they provide practice management and mental health services in addition to groups related to addiction and recovery. So really fantastic resource, again, free and confidential resource. So that's some of what we are doing. The other thing I wanted to tell people is that we have folks who have completed their terms. We actually have a committee of 14 or 15 right now, and many of those folks have been appointed by the justices, and a handful of them were appointed by the justices actually back in 2020. And so we have people whose terms are coming to an end, and so the justices have put out a notice for application to our committee. And I would encourage people who are interested, please apply. Feel free to contact me. I'm happy to chat with you about it, but there will be some position openings. We typically have position openings every year as people roll off the committee, but we're always happy to work with new folks. So that this is the link here, and again, I can put that in the chat, but also it's on we'll put this up on our website as well. So, and then we do have on our website, we've got all of our annual reports. So we put out our 4th annual report for 2023, and that just gives you a sense of some of the different projects and initiatives that we've been up to. So those are all available to you. And then I wanted to just like really quickly sort of go back to some of the data just to make it really clear, like, why are we here and why are we doing what we're doing? And this was data that we found through a survey that was conducted by NORC out of the University of Chicago and Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers. If you haven't read this study, please take a look. It's got a lot of really great data, and so I'm just giving you sort of a very, very high level highlights here of the data. But one of the highlights, one of the findings was that more than 3/4 of lawyers are burned out in Massachusetts, and almost half have thought about leaving their employer or the profession. So, obviously that's very concerning. That was published in 2023, so very recently. So again, just another reason as to why we're doing this work, why it's so important. Also in this study, Massachusetts lawyers reported very concerning levels of anxiety, depression, and unhealthy alcohol use. And the rates were the highest for lawyers who are historically underrepresented and marginalized in the legal profession. We also find that one of the specific elements that we looked at in this study was workplaces and how workplaces can actually contribute to well-being, whether positively or negatively. And so we looked at some different factors, and specifically for lawyers from historically that are historically underrepresented in the profession. In the study found that across the board, these folks have less supportive work environments, and so the study then looked at these less supportive work environments and whether there was a correlation to some of the mental health issues and burnout, and found that lawyers without the supportive work environments reported high rates of burnout, anxiety, depression, lower satisfaction with life. And so these are elements that workplaces that have a direct impact on employees in workplaces. And so these are things that leaders in workplaces can actually change in their workplaces and actually make a direct contribution to a healthier profession. And one of the reasons why I raise this is because the affinity bar associations just recently published a very comprehensive set of proposals to enhance the well-being of lawyers historically underrepresented, and to dismantle systemic inequalities. This is again a very robust document. It provides proposals for sort of small organizations to larger organizations to public entities, and focuses also on early stage, mid stage, late stage. So kind of kind of meeting the organization where they are in terms of some of these DEI objectives. So I would really encourage folks to take a look at this. It was an effort really to provide like concrete solutions that were in response to the affinity bar town halls that our committee did a number of years ago, that talked about lived experiences and how we can make things better. And so this is a really great set of documents. So take a look. It's up on our website. We link to the affinity bar associations, and hopefully there'll be some programming around that too in the near future. All right. So just a couple of mentions in terms of some of the projects that we have going on, and I know I talk about this a lot because it's a big one, and we have more and more folks who who have been utilizing mentorship through this program. And thank you to folks here who maybe have served as mentors in this program. I see some of you, so appreciate that. We launched this program a number of years ago. It started as a pilot. It utilizes software to kind of make these connections. So that's a self-matching system. Mentees go into the system. They can connect with mentors. They can connect for meetings with multiple mentors, single session meetings with multiple members. And then last year, we just added a new program where folks can connect with a longer term mentor. So having a mentor over the course of 6 to 9 months, the same mentor, but can also participate in the other program as well. And so this is open to any attorney that's seeking mentorship. And so this is a really sort of diverse group of folks. We have 50 mentors in the program, and they range from lots of different practice areas, geographical areas. There are racial, gender differences as well. So, so if folks are thinking about mentorship or want to share this with your organizations, please feel free. And I'm always happy to chat with people about partnering in these efforts. The other program I wanted to mention is the partnership with the Health Connector for businesses. So we do have a partnership with the Health Connector for Business to provide small firms insurance through the Healthcare Connector for Business that provides some benefits, some credits that may not otherwise be available. Gives you access to brokers, and we've done some programming around this. And so if you go to the website, you'll see we have a link to a program that we've conducted with folks at the Health Connector. So it describes how this program works, and you can get more information there. But there's also a dedicated hotline just for attorneys that are interested in this program. The other thing I wanted to mention is that in our 2019 steering committee report, there was a recommendation to study programs that would allow for secured or personal leave from the court, which basically allows for attorneys to take necessary time off from court without jeopardizing their practice and professional reputation. There are a number of other states that have done this on the civil side. I haven't seen any that have done it on the criminal side yet. But it is something that our committee is actively pursuing and looking into. So if anyone here is interested, in this, feel free to let me know. We do have a group of folks that are working on this, which is exciting. And then just a couple of additional announcements. The Institute for Wellbeing in Law, which is a national 501c3 organization that works on well-being, and sort of was the transition from the National Task Force on Lawyer Wellbeing. It became the Institute for Wellbeing in Law, and now that's its sole focus is well-being in the law. They've been running a conference every year, and so the conference in January, the registration just opened. It is January 21st through the 22nd. It's a virtual conference, and you can find that information on their website. Just a disclaimer, I am the current president of that organization. Will be the immediate past president in half a month. But great organization that we work very closely with. Also, save the date, Wellbeing Week in Law. Wellbeing Week in Law, which has now been running for about 5 years, is May 5th through 9th. And we will certainly be doing a number of different activities and programs that week. We'll be partnering with bar associations, organizations to run things. If you're interested in doing something with us, please feel free to let us know, but that will be happening that week. There is a fantastic program happening this week virtually with Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers. It's actually a panel discussion. One of our committee members will be speaking. Gavin Alexander will be speaking. on that program and some other folks. And the topic is addressing depression and suicide in the legal community. And so that program is on Thursday, December 12th at 4 p.m. All right. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is that we do have a calendar of meetings now for the Legal Wellbeing Network. So if you want to set those aside, you can. February 4th, April 8th, June 10th, all at 1 p.m. So that will be our meeting schedule this week. And not this week, this year. No, this year, next year. This year, next year. And so our next meeting will be February 4th. All right. So I want to move to our speaker, Kara Simard, Professor Kara Simard, who is actually a member of the SJC Standing Committee on Lawyer Wellbeing's Legal Education Subcommittee. So she was appointed by the dean at UNH Franklin Pierce School of Law to serve on our legal education subcommittee. I believe, Kara, we met at our summit, our law school summit at Suffolk last year that we put on this past spring. And so Kara, we were chatting on the last legal education subcommittee meeting, and we were chatting with some of the professors about what, how they were handling sort of some of the sort of tension and maybe conflict post-election. And so Kara mentioned that she was doing some work with her students on navigating crucial conversations and how to effectively manage conflict. And I thought that this was a really relevant topic to, in particular, to our work in the legal community as we continue to address civility in an ongoing way. I think folks may have seen, and if you haven't, in Mass Lawyers Weekly and the Mass Bar Association Wellbeing Committee has been running a series on civility and has had, I think, four articles now. One came from our committee and Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers. Another attorney wrote one, and there's a couple from judges talking about civility and the legal profession. And so I thought this was quite a relevant topic. And so so I am going to pass it over to Professor Simard to chat with us about this topic, and I will stop sharing my screen for you, Sarah. And per usual, we will record through the presentation portion, and then we will stop recording so that we can engage in discussion. I can see that. You're good. But I cannot hear you. Maybe that's what we should have tested before. So worried about the slides.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Oh, you
yes.
can. Okay. Yeah,
Yes.
It did work before, right? We had a conversation at the beginning.
I thought, did we? I don't know. Did we? We did. Yes. Okay.
Okay. Can you hear me now, everyone?
Yes. Yes.
All right. Great. Thank you. And thanks for including me in this community. I've really enjoyed coming to these meetings. So
it's a little light. I don't know if I'm sorry to jump in. The sound is a little soft.
Yes, same here. It does sound a little bit soft.
Okay. All right. Let me see. What else can I try here? Stop that for a minute.
That sounds a little bit better, although it may be because you just moved a little closer. I'm not sure.
I'll try to stand close. Is this okay?
That's better. I think it's better.
All right. I'm loud. I can try to just talk really loud. I'm just making sure I have my correct speaker. I think I do.
The mic, you want to look at the microphone?
Yeah. Does this one sound better or worse?
Yes, that's better, much better.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. I must have
Okay.
got booted to the wrong mic. All right. We'll try this again. Sorry, everyone.
No, that's okay. And you just need to just reshare your screen because the sharing dropped, I think, when you were tweaking the settings.
All right. Do you all see the slideshow now?
Almost. Yep, there it is.
Okay. Great. All right. So anyway, what I thought about doing was kind of going through a little bit of the lesson that I did with my students and kind of talking about crucial conversations and handling controversial topics in the workplace. And this came up for my students particularly because I had a student last semester who had asked about what happens when politics comes up in the workplace and how do you deal with it. Most students want to avoid this topic completely, which is often advisable, but sometimes there are things that are somewhat controversial, Supreme Court decisions coming out, just conversations you have to have with colleagues or clients that can be rather difficult, even if they're not involving politics or other sort of topics that we try to avoid. And so I decided to do this topic this year with my students before the election, kind of thinking about what may be coming up and being talked about in the workplace. So why did I sort of talk to them about it? I think obviously the times we are living in and the issues that we're facing just generally can make things a little bit heated sometimes. As lawyers, we do encounter a lot of crucial conversations that are necessary that we cannot avoid. These skills on how to have these conversations can also help us strengthen relationships with our colleagues or other people we're interacting with in legal practice, helping us solve problems. And being skilled in these conversations can actually also help us influence decisions and other people and their perspectives. And having a good dialogue with people we interact with regularly, these skills are learnable. So when I say crucial conversation, what am I talking about specifically? That's a conversation where stakes are high, opinions differ, and emotions run strong. So we're not necessarily in agreement with the other person, and it causes a lot of emotion for those involved. So I am not an expert in this, and I did not come up with how to handle this on my own. So this is not my area of expertise. These are some resources that are really, really helpful. And so my sort of lesson that I did with my students is primarily from the Crucial Conversations 3rd edition book. They have a website also on cruciallearning.com where you can access a whole bunch of resources, attend trainings. There's all kinds of stuff available on this. And the book Difficult Conversations is also a really helpful book as well, sort of a different way of preparing for different types of conversations. I'm kind of still working my way through that book. So primarily what I'm focusing on is from the Crucial Conversations book. All right, so essentially when we're talking about these conversations and how to have a successful conversation, typically the focus on these is having this free flow of information. So we want people to openly and honestly express their opinions, share their feelings, articulate their theories, be willing and capable to share their views, even if their ideas or thoughts are controversial or unpopular, and effectively creating that dialogue. So when we're having a dialogue and we're entering these conversations, we're coming at it from our own sort of personal thoughts and feelings about what's happening. But what we want to do is make sure that everybody feels safe to add meaning to the conversation and add their ideas. So this idea of this filling the shared pool of meaning. So we want everyone to be able to express and articulate the information that's important to them and relevant to them, which ultimately can result in better decisions, better relationships. And when we're not sharing meeting and allowing everybody to sort of participate in the conversation, there are these other things that we resort to. So silence, that would be avoiding confrontation, giving the cold shoulder, not engaging with the other person. Relying on things like hints, sarcasm, innuendo, looks of disgust to share how we're feeling or our points. Blaming others for the problem at issue. Resorting to emotional violence, so sort of that intellectual bullying, verbal attacks. Acting like we know everything, hoping that people will just believe our arguments because we are so firm and forceful of them on others. Discrediting others or using force to get our way, so those hurtful comments or biased monologues. So to prepare for one of these conversations, if you sort of know it's coming up, maybe you are anticipating a conversation with a colleague about something that you need to talk about. First, you want to make sure you're holding the right conversation. And so common mistakes that we make when we're choosing our topic for the conversation is picking the easy conversation, the easy topic over the hard one. So maybe the one that we think we can be more successful in and that is more easy to, prevail rather than the one that is the most important or the most applicable to our goals. And then the other thing that we often do is pick the more recent incident over the right choice. And so more recent behavior rather than behavior that maybe mattered more previously. So some of the signs to think about when you're having the wrong conversation are that your emotions escalate. Maybe you walk away skeptical that anything's going to change or that conversation had any effect or meaning at all. Or you're in a deja vu dialogue. You feel like you just keep saying the same thing over and over again to a person and nothing ever changes. So some of the ways that we can prepare for the conversations is to try to focus on one issue. So try to prioritize that one issue that is the most important. And in order to decide on that issue, you want to sort of look through the different potential issues. So content, there's a one-time thing that happened, a pattern, maybe a repeated incident, patterns of behavior, or the relationship itself. Is there an issue of trust, competence, or respect? Do you need to talk about process? Do you need to talk about how you're going to communicate in this conversation? When you're choosing the topic, you want to make sure you're focusing on what you really want, the highest priority, and what is standing between you and the objective. Simplify, so be able to have that sort of simple problem statement, simply what you want to discuss in like a 1 or 2 sentence. If it is too complex of a topic to discuss, then maybe this is not the right conversation and you need to go back to the drawing board and simple it down and pick things out a bit more. And be prepared to sort of expect that the conversation and the topic could change. And so what oftentimes happens when we're having difficult conversations with people is they might try to shift the focus of the conversation to something else. Maybe they're trying to take the blame off of their own behavior and put it on something else. And you want to make sure that you're sticking to the conversation that you're trying to have rather than sort of going back to or responding to the comments of the other person. And it can be okay to shift your conversation, but you need to acknowledge that you're doing that. And another option would be to place a bookmark. So when those new issues come up in the conversation that do need to be addressed, make sure that you're, letting that person know that you're focusing on your goals with this conversation, but we'll go back and talk about this other thing later. You want to make sure you're examining your motives and staying focused on what you want in the conversation. So when you find yourself either going back towards kind of avoiding not saying anything or sort of, hurtful words and things like that, you want to try to pay attention to your motives and think about, what am I acting like I want? Am I coming across as someone who's just trying to win an argument, or am I coming across as somebody who's trying to solve a problem? So think about your specific behavior there. You want to ask yourself, what do I want for myself? What do I want for the others involved in this conversation and for our relationship as a whole? And what should I do right now to move towards what I really want? And when we're thinking about that and trying to focus more, can help us, stay more focused on the issue that we want to address rather than all the outside stuff that always comes in when we're having these difficult conversations. It's important to keep in mind that we want to not rush through these questions as we're going through them and think more about the long game. So if this is somebody that you work with and you need to maintain a long-term relationship with, think about what you want for yourself long-term. What kind of person do you want to be? How do you want to treat others? And how do you need to show up for this conversation to be that kind of a person? And refuse the fool's choice. So that's attacking, hiding, and those sorts of things. So as you consider what you want to notice if you're starting to fall into one of these sort of other traps. So you want to clarify, what do I really want? What do I not want? And then try to combine these two things to an and question that forces you to sort of problem solve here by getting what you want and what you don't want at the same time. For an example, is there a way to tell your colleague your real concerns and also not insult or offend them at the same time? So when we're having these conversations, a lot of times, we're making observations. We're seeing and hearing something, and then it ultimately triggers some emotions in us. We have feelings. Maybe we're angry, maybe we're scared, whatever, we're feeling emotional. But what happens in between those two steps are the story that we come up with. And it's the story that we're coming up with that is leading to the feelings that we're having. And so when we think about stories, it's adding meaning to what we observe. So we're making a guess at the motive that is driving that person's behavior, or we're adding our own judgment to it. And these stories provide our rationale for what's going on. It's how we're interpreting what we are observing. And then after we have these feelings, then we act in some way. And so when we are trying to have a conversation about something that's difficult, we want to make sure we're controlling our emotions in a way that keeps us focused and able to stay in a dialogue, even if we're feeling hurt or attacked or angry. So to do this, there's this number of different sort of tools that you can use and things to think about. So going back through your behavior to start, if you find yourself moving away from that dialogue, think about how you're acting out. Are you acting out your concerns rather than talking them through with your words? Put your feelings into words. So think about identifying the emotions and naming them, like how exactly are you feeling and what emotions are making you act this way. Analyze those stories. So think about what story you're creating and how it's creating these emotions. Get back to the facts. So thinking about the hard facts rather than the sort of the story that you're creating or the judgments that you're giving. So what evidence do you actually have to support the story that you've created? And then think about what you've seen or heard in observations that actually conflict with this judgment or story that you've created. And then you want to watch for the clever stories. So those are the victim, villain, and helpless stories. So victim, I am the innocent person here. It's not my fault. I have done nothing wrong, and I have not contributed to this problem at all. The villain stories is where it's the other person's fault. They are deserving of whatever suffering they're getting here. And that can sometimes help us justify any negative actions we take towards them by sort of making them out to be the bad guy. And then the helpless stories, there's nothing else I can do here. I'm powerless to change anything. Nothing will be helpful. And so we want to try to avoid that. And if we're finding ourselves sort of falling into those traps, we want to recognize it. And then we want to tell the rest of the story. So rather than coming up with these stories that are so quick that they just happen, we don't always know that they're happening. We don't always think about them. But we think about it, we want to actually make sure that we're useful in the story that we're making up about what's going on. So turn it back to yourself. Did I do something to contribute this? What am I not noticing about my role in this problem? Make sure you're humanizing the other person. Why would a reasonable, rational, and decent person do this or think this or say this? And then turn the helpless into the able. So go back to your original motives. What do I really want? And what can I do right now to move towards what I really want? So before the conversation, just to kind of summarize, you want to recognize that the conversation might be crucial. Making sure you're having the right conversation. Think about what you really want out of that conversation, and then take control of your emotions. During the conversation, when it's actually happening, want to make sure that you're paying attention to when safety is at risk. And that's not necessarily your physical safety, although I suppose it could be, but more about your emotional safety. And when we're caught up in these difficult conversations, we're not always exactly really seeing everything that's going on. And sometimes when things become stressful, we do exactly the opposite of what we should be doing to problem solve or get to our goals. So we want to watch for content and conditions. So the sooner that you're no longer in this free-flowing dialogue that is helpful, once you recognize that, you can get back to it. So look at what's being said and how it's being said. Make sure you're able to spot the crucial conversations when they come up. Not every one of these conversations is something that you expect or know is going to happen, and they may pop into a conversation that you're having with someone unexpectedly. So you want to try to stay alert for that moment that the conversation goes from routine or regular old harmless discussion to something that is more crucial. And then pay attention to the signs that that's happening. So sometimes it might just be the way you're feeling, emotions you're suddenly noticing you're having, or your behavior changes. And then look for safety problems. So safe doesn't necessarily mean you're comfortable. Crucial conversations by their nature are difficult and often uncomfortable. So you're not likely going to be comfortable, but you want to make sure that there's actually a dialogue, that it was a free-flowing conversation, that everyone is able to speak honestly and respectfully to each other. And then you want to look for signs, is anybody lashing out? And notice when safety is at risk. So are others moving towards silence? Are they withholding information from that pool of meeting? Are they trying to avoid the problem that is being discussed? Or are they resorting to violence, so verbal strategy to try to convince or control others to their point of view, such as sort of controlling the conversation, talking so much that nobody else can participate, name calling, labeling, attacking, anything like that. And then you want to think about how you manage stress yourself. So what is your style under stress? So pay attention to your own behavior. How good are you at monitoring your behavior and reactions when conversations get difficult? Are you somebody who often shuts down? Do you go a little bit overboard with engagement and get too aggressive? How do you manage this? And there's some really good tools out there on the internet to try to do these own self-assessments for yourself to see how you do with these things. And the style under stress test is on that website from that first slide that you can access and do the test yourself to see sort of what areas you struggle with more and what areas you can kind of improve on and where your strengths are. So during the conversation, you want to make sure it is safe. It's not only safe for you, but safe for everybody involved so that this is a conversation that can go somewhere. So you want to, if it's not safe, you need to step out of the content of the conversation. Make sure that it is now, you make it safe. And then when safety is restored, go back to that issue that you're trying to discuss. And so you want to decide first which condition of safety is at risk. Do the other people in the conversation feel like you care about what they have to say or their goals? Do they trust your motives, or are they looking at it differently? And do the others in the conversation believe that you respect them? And then do you feel the same from others involved? So if you need to try to make it safe, you want to make sure that you're sharing your good intent. So share what it is that you want for yourself and the other person, that you do have good intent behind this conversation. Apologize when appropriate. So if you have violated respect, make sure you apologize for it. Contrast to fix misunderstandings. So when others misunderstand your purpose or your intent, use contrasting. So start with explaining what it is that you don't intend or mean, and then explain what you do intend or mean. And then try to create a mutual purpose so that you're both trying to come, to reach some similar goals here. So if you both have cross purposes, you have different goals, you have different expectations, you can use these other skills to try to get to a place where you can, agree and communicate better. So one is to commit to seek mutual purpose, that you're both going to commit to this conversation and this situation until you come away with sort of a mutual understanding, and that you solve the problem. Recognize the purpose behind the strategy. So maybe what you're both saying are completely different, contrasting things. But if you dig down deeper into why you're saying this or asking this or believing this, you might have sort of a joint agreement underneath that you just have to dig a little bit deeper to find out. Invent a mutual purpose. So that's where you sort of abandon your original purposes and you come to something that you can both agree or all agree with. And brainstorm new strategies. So these are all different ways to kind of get back to the conversation. And then in order to try to stay in a place where you can be persuasive and not abrasive, you want to make sure you're clear with where you're coming from and where you're going. So you want to make sure that you're sharing your facts. So that's what you've seen, heard, or experienced directly. Like, what is that concrete evidence that you have? You've been saying these things to me regularly, and it is, making me feel a certain way, rather than coming at someone and saying, listen, you're, a jerk and you're being mean, and you're super offensive. So you've said these things to me and I feel this way. A good way to sort of start with sharing your facts is starting with some of the least controversial or most persuasive elements from what it is you're trying to get across. Tell your story, so explain what you're beginning to conclude based on what you're observing. Share what it is that you want to express, and then you want to make sure that you're giving an opportunity for the other person to also share their facts, their stories, how they see it. What is their perspective? Help you understand where it is that they're coming from. Talk tentatively. So rather than stating things as hard facts that might be more opinions, make sure you're not overstating things. So in my opinion, or I believe this. And encourage testing. So that's where we want to make sure that other people feel safe to express different or opposing views, even if they're controversial. So make sure that they know that you want to hear them and that you may not agree, but you're open to hearing what their perspective is. And then when others sort of blow up or clam up, we want to make sure that we're exploring their path, so their motives and position. And you want to do that by starting with an attitude of curiosity and patience, and then use some listening skills to help. So ask by expressing interest in their view, acknowledging the emotions that maybe they're feeling. So you can acknowledge that I understand you seem to be upset about this. Paraphrase, so share, restating what you've heard them share with you in your own words so that they know that you're sort of listening and thinking through what they're sharing. And if they're continuing to hold back and not participating in a conversation that you really need to have, take your guess at what they might be thinking and feeling to kind of prompt them to give a response. And then what if you disagree? So as you begin to respond, agree with the parts that you do agree with. So express those shared views that you both have. If others leave something out in this conversation, agree with what you agree and the shared views, but then build onto that by adding the things that were left out of the discussion or that they're not considering. And then when you do differ, rather than suggest that somebody else is wrong or their opinion isn't correct, try to compare the two views. So I see things differently, and this is why or how. This is the perspective that I am coming at from. My information is different from yours. Can I share the information that I have? And then at the end of the conversation, you want to try to move to action. So this is, maybe it's a group discussion, a workplace discussion to kind of come up with how are we going to resolve this issue. So you're going to need to decide how to decide. So are decisions being made by one person, or is it being made with others involved? Is it that's sort of the command style, the consult, where input is gathered from the group and then sort of a subset, a leadership team makes a decision. Is there going to be a vote? Is everyone going to vote and there's a percentage swaying the decision, majority rules? Or a consensus? Are you trying to make a decision by everyone coming to an agreement and supporting that final decision? And then if there are sort of action items from whatever that conversation was, you want to make sure that you're finishing clearly. So who does what by when, make sure those deliverables are crystal clear, set up a follow-up timeline, record the commitments, write them down, make sure everybody knows what it is that they're supposed to do and follow up with it, and hold people accountable to their promises. So these are sort of like just general, but handling controversial topics in the workplace is, those are sort of tools for having conversations, but then sometimes you have these other things that come up that maybe is a conversation or maybe it isn't. Maybe you don't want to have the conversation. But there are certain ways that we can kind of try to get along in a place where we all have to interact with each other. So these are sort of some tips on how to do that. One, we want to see others as potential allies, not adversaries. So rather than assuming that person is against you, assume they're with you and then try to go from that perspective. Making sure you remember that intent matters. So listen to their views, be curious, use active listening skills to try to understand their view and ask questions about it. And maybe you completely disagree, but asking those follow-up questions might help you better understand where they're coming from and what their intent is. Important to be kind. I say this, that I feel like this is one of those things that you shouldn't have to tell people, but being kind can go a long way. So rather than name calling, stereotyping people, using bias, judging them, just be kind and listen. Try not to focus on convincing someone to come to your position or that you're right. Your main goal shouldn't be to change somebody's mind. Rather, you should try to focus on asking questions to encourage them to consider a different perspective without insisting that they're wrong. People may be more likely to come around to your side of it if they think that they've kind of gotten there on their own, rather than you told them this is what they should think. Communicate to be understood. So speak from your point of view. Try not to say everything all at once, little bits at a time. Try to remain skeptical of your own point of view to allow yourself to come across as having that humility and ability to consider other positions. Pay attention to your feelings and your triggers. So making sure that you're aware of what kind of sets you off ahead of time so that you can try to separate those strong feelings that are happening from what the person is saying in the moment, or take a break if you need to and step away from the conversation. You can own your right to have your opinion. You do not have to agree with somebody else or change your mind at all. And it's okay to agree to disagree and say, I have a different perspective. I don't agree with you. I'm willing to reconsider with more information, but right now I've not changed my mind. You want to always make sure you're considering the relationship and what you can say and what maybe you can't say, and think about how that relationship might need to continue into the future. So if this is, relationship with opposing counsel in a case, and, you have different views, you may need to work with that person in the future. And so you want to think about that relationship and then when interacting. And be mindful of power issues. If this is someone who's a supervisor for you at work, being aware of the fact that this may influence what you say or what they say. And sometimes it might be helpful to name those power issues in the conversation. Don't be afraid to ask for help. So it's okay to find allies or others in leadership positions who might be able to help you through a difficult issue or conversation. Remaining patient. Changing minds and behaviors takes a lot of time, and sometimes you just have to keep at it and hope that over time things might change or improve. Using neutral phrases and keeping language positive is important. Things like I hear you, I understand, and always trying to make sure you end the conversation respectfully if possible. So diffusing tension, that neutral language and positive language can go a long way. When you're talking about things that are controversial, like politics in the workplace or with others you interact with, sometimes it can be helpful to focus on policies specifically. So rather than more generally about politics, focus on specific policies and why your position is what it is. Try to separate your bias. So just because you don't agree with someone politically, it doesn't mean you can't work with them or that they're bad at their job or they're a bad person. So trying to separate your bias from the opinions you may have about that person because of their political positions. It's okay to sometimes be transparent and acknowledge awkwardness in these situations and conversations. Always ask questions. Sometimes you can redirect the conversation. So if a conversation comes up that you're completely uncomfortable with having, particularly in the workplace, you can always try to change the subject to a topic that is relevant to everybody or that everybody feels more comfortable participating in. And then trying to be compassionate towards their perspectives so they don't feel attacked or alienated. And that is all I have. So I'm going to stop my share.